made of lack of interpretation statements of multiple contradictory interpretations by one should have found lessons of active negative reactive which not have to interpret I cannot negative interpretation the case also means that opposite interpretation must be established in sexual to make intentions warranted in resolving abuse. Second, evaluate the topic on balance today is most specific on both active negative equal burden proving this that is most commonly accepted truth other interprets structurally distant and then one debater for allowing them to disprove a minority events and express practice keys both debater equal factual actions valid. B. Key to class establishes both debater from it prevents both debater from nitpicking exceptions to create these both scenarios of both debaters winning specific scenarios. Third, the topic is U.S. specific, atypically majority topically specified U.S. meaning specification prevents infinite research burden is most critical key to fairness and education is allowed to prepare and relevant debates about topical issues. B. Stable ground context C. Stable ground leading possible between the acronym down to stable lives all different countries vary in terms of responses to domestic violence as well as the right guaranteed to victims between the context key to debating the issue key to fairness to be stable ground in order to make arguments. Fourth, skepticism affirms that even having more prohibitions of morality exists not a normative form to spend enable condemn action ratifying more permissibility. That action permitted to be the means of performing analysis to determine that a person ought to refrain from it also skepticism doesn't render morality incoherent just matters given more reasons false and premise and capital or relativist arguments that attempt to provide object more reasons as fallacious at some level does skepticism or relativism or true vote absence that provide normatively valid ethical actions against action are also fallacious. Fifth, New Oxford American Dictionary defines A as a third person singular present of B, meaning the acronym to prove the topic true under the status quo condition more of this means the use of fiat is non-textual since deny the grammatical meaning of the verb is and its future conditional would be. Textuality is key to factors that determines the predictable parameters around established affidavit burdens. Sixth, presume after offset statistical negative bias structural disadvantage to come first since the already starts to debate disadvantage disadvantage must make up ground has been lost before the balance empirically proven there's a reason everyone flips naked out rounds. I value morality, moral questions, spiritual ways to resolve conflicts concerning the normativity of certain intuitive beliefs. We have no way of verifying the existence of morality. Nature concludes this making objective moral evaluation without appealing to non-verifiable explanation of morality. Collier. A transcendent objective morality is epistemically inaccessible to naturalistic fallacy rules and inferring moral imperatives of the fact we have these values with no internal evolutionary justification of morality, so no justification of morality, no reason to plan about obligation of moral force, morality, contingent phenomenon with no objective justification. Thus, attempts to establish objective moral claims trigger an infinite regress related to the fallacy of naturally objective morality, verification of objective morality requires a possible because epistemic burden of identifying the source of moral standards to be conditioned believing the existence of more objective morality, so objective morality motivates us to believe that our reasons are truly normative, creating circular logic and failing to validate naturally normative ethics. And chains of moral reasoning cannot be valid concluded without terminating subjective assertions. McIntyre. Agents can only justify a particular belief by some universal rule, can only justify that rule by some more general rule, since every chain of reasoning must be finite reasoning must always terminate to some rule for which no reason can be given the justification is thus always a choice unguided by criteria universal principle is an expression of the preferences of the individual will. Also, there is no objective moral truth, no objective chain of moral truth give normative reasons by individual lots of all moral claims, only shared agreements give rise to ethics and provide the ground for making judgments based upon mutual expectation. Harmon. We make an adjustment on a person only if it's capable of being motivated by the relevant moral considerations in our judgment. Say someone is right or wrong to have done something means when I was faced that would consider human life manager. One of us means nothing that in fact by itself gives them no reason to avoid the action in such cases be odd to say that beings ought to avoid interest real judge that they are dreadful and to be repelled to be destroyed, not that they should not act as they do. But morality is not a hopeless cause. Misunderstandings of morality can be reconciled through mutual agreements regulating behavior. Kelson. This subjectivistic character of relativistic theory of knowledge of relativistic epistemology and self-contradicting for the egos only exist in reality, and absolute reality, the existence of many egos must be admitted. There's many worlds that are doing subject philosophical relativism, avoid pluralism and competency and inability to see the objective existence of one and the same world for all. The assumption that all individuals are equal for their subject being possible, the objective knowledge and conformity with one another, an assumption confirmed by the external behavior of individuals. And these agreements manifest themselves in the form of contractual agreements resolving the skeptical challenge only contracts resolve the natural fallacy of categorizing the individuals in their natural states. Perish. Nothing is owed to a person before the conclusion of a contract. Injustice is no other than the non-performance of a covenant, and when no covenant has been preceded, with no right has been transferred, every man has the right to do everything, and consequently no action can be unjust, a breach, or violation of covenant, with all men is called injury consisting in some sort of act or omission, which is therefore called unjust. No person owed or is owed anything by nature before expressly agreeing to it. And only legal systems represent agreements between individuals and social forms are the only objective basis of moral judgment. But Nitsky. It is not possible to develop values independent of existing social forms. Moral persons' self-intrinsic goals are intimately tied to goals of society, and the society which law exists amongst existing social form constituting a legal norm. Social existence in society, we find that the participants of practice the rules and standard conduct which both justify the conformity to and criticize those who deviate. And even present in absolute good nature, legal institutions still form the basis of moral rules to respect the worth of other agents who have invested their trust in the agreements. Ripstein. A contract is a legal institution that governs the transfer of rights. The government transfers its powers. Their powers include the legal powers to do things if it fails to perform as required or wrongs to in the same way had I given you something and taken it back. In the case of contract, one's use of one's powers without having possession of the other. And respect for the construction of moral agreements is the ultimate product of practical reasons and the only normative guide to acting. We can only obligate ourselves to principles of acting back to rational reflections and determination of contract determines the principles which guide acting. The ultimate object of morality mandates to respect for internally imposed laws and stations honestly consent to contracts. Objective morality can only be expressed through contracts. This uniquely precludes deontology since respect for rationality can only be opposed one another through contractual agreements. And an infinite number of impractical from any given event because causal chain following any intentional actions or indeterminate consequential is not a sustainable ethical theory because it requires the impossible epistemological burden of isolating and evaluating an infinite number of effects in order to render an ethical judgment, i.e. the words of human tragedy may result in a greater good at a given point in time. Thus, these standards maintaining consistency with law if it is impossible to derive a clear precedent via contracts vote after that means there's no basis for a moral requirement in a topical situation which renders the action permissible. Thus, I contend that the Castle Doctrine permits deadly force. First, we in virtue taking from the right of the victim to use law under the Castle Doctrine for specific case law to general solutions as to the content of those laws and so certain about what the law is are meaningless absent specific reference to legal precedent. Or the duty to retreat is inapplicable to defendant's home because the Castle Doctrine provides that if assailant prevents the victim in the victim's own home, the victim may turn aggressive without any duty to retreat and justify his act by claiming self-defense. It has never been the law. The man assailed his own dwelling is bound for cheating, may stand his ground to resist the attack. Most states have adopted the Castle Doctrine except in self-defense. This includes co-inhabitants of a dwelling. Suck. State versus Thomas held the castle doctrine applied to co-inhabitants of a home. A person in a home has already retreated to the walls with no place further which he can flee in safety. There's a distinction being made between intruder attacking a co-inhabitant attacking the court. State in the case of domestic violence attacks are repeated over time in the case of the home, it's rarely possible that threat of violence or death, the victim's such act should not be required to flee. And the law presumes on the side of self-defense means precluding proportionality and imminency requirements. Sub 2. First, the law creates a presumption that a resident reasonably fears peril and thus permitted to kill the intruder in self-defense. Any killing of such an intruder is self-defense. Second, the law provides immunity from criminal prosecution except lack of people use force in self-defense as permitted by that law. And deadly force is also consistent with the universally applicability criterion of general self-defense law. Ewing. Current self-defense law justifies the use of deadly force against an adversary because she has made the choice to make under the same circumstances faced with extremely limited options of preventing help resigning herself in face not better than physical death. The battered woman is little in the way of true choice except she chooses to kill her battered choice is the choice other people would make under the same circumstances. And a victim's use of deadly force is classified as a justifiable rather than excusable homicide. Right. Self-defense in the case of battered women is classified as a justifiable homicide as opposed to excused homicide. Justification delays the allegedly criminal act legal and therefore only requires an objective evaluation of the criminal act. Thus, I affirm.
Ready?
Yeah.
So if I prove that the majority of instances of deadly force in response to domestic violence within the United States are illegal, is that sufficient to turn the issue? So we're looking at the U.S. specifically, and your other observation says that we're just talking about the resolution in general, right?
I mean, if you empirically prove, if you make an argument that's like, empirically, this is where domestic violence leads to deadly force, I would contend it doesn't really answer back the on balance, because I'm still saying that in the majority of states, or in the majority of instances, this is the rule. Whether or not it acts upon it's acted upon that rule in a particular circumstance, or like how statistically there's a distribution, that's irrelevant to whether or not there's a general justification.
All right, that's fine. So if I prove that on balance, in the majority of states or whatever, there is a general rule that makes it illegal, that's sufficient to negate.
I mean, if you can have a clear precedent that says it's illegal, yes.
Okay. Let's talk about. All right. Let's talk about your framework. Is there anything like so? All this like skepticism affirmed stuff only matters if we like both lose a framework, right?
It only matters if skepticism is triggered. If like you can see the AC framework, like the AC framework solves skepticism, is the argument.
Okay, cool. So how does the AC framework solve skepticism? Does that come out of Kelson and Parrish?
That's Kelson and Parrish, and as well as then there's arguments. Yeah, that's Kelson and Parrish.
Okay, let's talk about Kelson then. What does Kelson say?
Kelson says that if there's the subjective character of knowledge, or the fact that like we all have like different subjective beliefs about the content of morality, that would mean that we could never form an objective moral opinion. However, the reason why we can reconcile that is because when we assume that everybody is able to form subjective opinions, we are then able to make the further assumption that we can have those opinions come in agreements with each other, which is empirically confirmed by the
What happens if we don't all agree on the law?
I mean, I would say that the law exists, right? So that's why the law has to come before contracts, like a hypothetical, like contractarian type contract, is because the law is an objective existence. Whether or not we all agree to the law being good or bad doesn't deny the fact that it's still an objective standard of morality that is a reflection of social forms.
Okay, well, let's talk about your arguments. You said that the Castle Doctrine should apply to battered women, right?
No, the argument is the Castle Doctrine does apply to battered women.
Then why aren't more battered women, like, do you read any statistics saying that battered women who use deadly force get off on like justifiable homicide defenses?
I mean, there's no evidence in the AC that says that speaks to that. But like, if you want to read like evidence that says like they don't or they get like convicted, like we can have a discussion about why that evidence would be good or bad.
Okay, that's fine. Let's talk about. Okay, so what is your justification other than Castle Doctrine? It's just the Ewing card.
Yeah, the Ewing card just says like general self-defense law means and like that you would justify the resolution as well.
Okay, why?
Okay, so the Ewing card references a legal precedent that says that self-defense is okay, and it's established in the state of North Dakota versus L something decision. I can find it specifically for you.
Was that a U.S. Supreme Court decision?
It was a I believe it was a Supreme Court decision.
So a North Dakota Supreme Court decision?
I believe so.
Okay.
But it's like the idea of common law means that if it's decided in one situation, that is the precedent until another state court decides to overturn it.
Okay, cool.
Meaning, like, unless there's conflicting case law.
All right, can I see the AC?
Sure. I will hold the AC out of this document since I'm putting other stuff in this document.
All right. It'll be NCAC. Everybody? I value morality. Freedom is a postulate of morality. To blame people, they must be causally responsible for an action. Blaming a non-culpable actor is a contradiction because blaming itself assumes culpability. A priori reason is the only correct basis of morality. Kant. The actions of the human being are called free because they are actions caused from within by representations produced by our own powers, whereby desires are evoked on occasions and circumstances, and hence actions are produced at our own discretion. If these representations exist in time in the antecedent state and internal preceding state, these determinations may be internal, still they are always determining grounds of causality of being insofar as existence is determinable in time and therefore under necessitating conditions of past time, which are thus when the subject is to act no longer within his control. Freedom must be thought of as independence from everything empirical. Without this freedom, which is alone practical a priori, no moral law is possible. This simply means that morality needs to be based on freedom because it's about judging human action and making humans responsible for what they are free to do. It assumes some conception of freedom and only a priori practical reason allows this conception of freedom because any other system of morality that's based on the empirical is always going to exist within space and time, and everything within space and time has some prior cause within space and time, and that cause has some prior cause, and this is ultimately going to lead to an infinite regress and not account for human freedom. So we have to look to a priori reason which escapes space and time. Thus, we must act on universally valid reasons to discover the moral law. Velleman continues. The fact that the validity of some reasons could not be universally accessible is already universally accessible to reasoners. Any of whom can perform the reasoning by which it's come to light. Thus, you share respect with all reasoners to this extent. It is common knowledge among all reasoners. The validity of certain reasons for acting cannot be common knowledge among all reasoners. This item of common knowledge constitutes a universal constraint on what can count as a reason for acting. A requirement for an attack for reasons would forbid acting on the basis of considerations whose validity as reasons could not be common knowledge among all reasoners. Thus, this simply means that we have to look to practical reason to determine whether something is moral. All reasoners can access the content of whether or something forms a logical contradiction, whether or not A and not A are both true at the same time. This means that when we look to practical reason, we have to look to see whether something is a logical contradiction to see if it's immoral. Thus, the negative burden is to prove that the maxim of using deadly force to eliminate an abuser is inconsistent with the authoritative requirements set by a priori reason. Contention 1. Intending to feel is categorically wrong even if it is for the sake of reason. Velleman 2. The value of our personhood is inseparable from the value of participating in personhood is shared status. People, only by sharing in common knowledge do we find ourselves subject to authoritative requirements insofar as being a person matters belonging to community. Persons must matter. The importance of both is what makes it important to act for reasons. That's why it's rational to treat any person merely as a means. No reason for action can justify treating another person as mere reflector of value because the importance of acting for reasons depends on the importance of personhood. General reasons matter because persons matter. We show regard for reasons. We cannot show regard for reasons by showing disregard for persons. This just means that it's always going to be immoral to kill another person because our reasons dictate that we respect the reasons of others, and we can't devalue another person. Also, it's going to very clearly form a logical contradiction when you try to affirm the resolution because at the same time the victim is trying to express her outer freedom and limit the outer freedom of another person, which means when we try to universalize that maxim, then the abuser would express his freedom. That's a very clear contradiction because at the same time the abuser's freedom is being expressed and limited. So it's a very clear contradiction. Go to the AC. Start on skeptiferns. Skepticism actually negates because you need a moral system to call something morally permissible. Joyce. From the concept of moral permissibility, we can construct moral obligation. Acting is obligatory if and only if refraining from acting is not permissible. Therefore, an argument showing that moral obligation makes no sense and shows that moral permissibility makes no sense. Similarly, the practice of categorizing certain actions as supererogatory is sensible only in the background of a practice of categorizing other actions is required. This means that we can only have something that's morally permissible if things can be morally obligatory. We can't have moral permissibility without moral obligation. His Rat's definition is simply incorrect. Moral permissibility assumes some sort of moral system. So presumption wouldn't be triggered if both of our frameworks go away. Skepticism would be triggered and skepticism negates. Now, on contractarianism as a framework. His framework of how contracts are going to escape moral relativism. 1. Contracts aren't sufficiently motivational because they appeal to an obligation to follow the contract that is never justified. Korsgaard. Suppose the authority of the obligation derives from the power of our motives. Your obligation varies along with your motives, and so you can do no wrong. We are faced with a dilemma if we try to derive authority of morality from some natural source. The power will evaporate in our hands. If we try to derive from some supposedly normative consideration, such as the contract, we must in turn explain why the consideration is normative, or the authority comes from, either the authority comes from morality, in which case we've argued in a circle, or it comes from something else, and we are faced with an infinite regress. 2. Motivational internalism based on contracts can never generate norms by moral agreement. Velleman 3. In any agreement, the benefit to me follows from your believing in my effectively intending to cooperate, not from my actually intending to cooperate, and certainly from my so intending effectively. Even if I formed an intention to cooperate, I would have no reason to let it take effect in my future behavior, and I have no reason to form a cooperative intention if I can conceive and convincingly feign one. Instead, it seems that I cannot commit my future self to cooperate, and that even if I could, I cannot give credible evidence of having done so. 3. Any system of contractarianism is incoherent in its very core assumptions. Cud. The characterization of individuals in the state of nature leads to a dilemma. The state of nature is a potential war of all against all can be generated either as a result of passions or rationality. If the passions account is correct, then the contractors will still be motivated by these passions after the social contract is drawn up, and so will fail to comply to it. If rationality becomes correct, then the rational actors will not comply with the social contract anymore, and they will cooperate with each other before it is made. Gautier must claim that without the contract, individuals will be stuck in some suboptimal situation that is bad enough to motivate them to make concessions to some agreement. The interaction were only valuable fruits of cooperation that it bears with self-interested cooperators, and then it will be unlikely that those cooperators could successfully solve the compliance problems. These are 3 reasons why contractarianism fails in general. Let's go through specific justifications. This Collier card says that we have to be able to verify ethics. However, my framework is going to account for this. Practical reason is not infinitely regressive because every time we ask for a reason for practical reason, we're conceding the authority of practical reason. But by saying we need reasons for anything, we say that practical reason is going to matter. Also, every time an agent acts, they act for reasons. Specifically, every time an agent makes a moral judgment, he or she uses moral reasons to make that judgment, which means that practical reason is always going to be consistent to every agent. My Velleman 1 card specifically explains how practical reason applies to every moral agent in the same way. So it's not going to be it is going to provide an objective basis for morality that is not infinitely regressive and Matthews McIntyre it is, based on the first principle that every agent, by definition, can use practical reason. Now, off his Harman, Kelson, and Parrish analysis is all being answered by my 3 blocks about practical reason. So since we're not looking to subjective, since we can ground an objective system of morality, then you're going to look to the NC over the AC. Also, I'd say that the Kant analysis is going to take out the AC framework, because the AC framework is based on some system of law that exists within space and time, and therefore has a prior cause within space and time, so it can't truly account for human freedom. Now, go to the argument about how he best controls the internal link to practical reason. This is under the Betnisky card. One, people don't necessarily have to agree to something for it to be consistent with practical reason. There are immoral people who wouldn't agree to something, therefore it wouldn't be consistent with practical reason in the form of a contract, because then immoral people wouldn't be part of that contract. And second, my responses to contracts are going to take this out. Contracts can't be motivational, whereas practical reason always has to be motivational. So my answer still applies. Don't let him to extend this blip to take out the NC. Now on his offense. His offense is specific to state court. He doesn't give you any arguments about the system as a whole or about what actually happens empirically in the United States. Remember, I just have to prove on balance, and I just have to prove in the United States. So if I prove that in the majority of the United States it's against the law, that turns back the AC. So turn it. In the majority of the United States it's against the law because women go to prison. Leonard. Without fail, abuse women who kill and charged with murder and plead self-defense, doing state on 100 cases revealed. Despite abundant evidence they were severely abused by the men they killed, most women are convicted due to the circumstances surrounding homicidal acts do not meet requirements of current self-defense law. And man's random sample of 114 perpetrated spousal homicides against abusers over high offenders receive prison sentences. Ostrov reports the vast majority of women accused of killing their abuse partners, 80%, are convicted and receive long, harsh sentences. This is 3 studies telling you that it's not consistent with self-defense law to kill your abuser. Finally, New Oxford American Dictionary defines deliberate as unconsciously and intentionally fully considered and not impulsive. This means that deadly force in the resolution is not used in the heat of the moment, such as during an attack. Any evidence about deadly force in confrontational scenarios is irrelevant. The intention behind deadly force is not self-defense. The action is taken completely consciously consistent with the agent retaliating rather than acting in self-defense. So Cassie's doctrine doesn't apply, and his self-defense arguments don't apply because it's deliberate. It's not in the heat of the moment. It's not when someone is trapped within their home.
Can I see the answer?
Yep. Do you want me to put everything in one document?
Sure. That'd be awesome.
So within the NC, I didn't read Joyce in the NC, I read it as a response to case.
Okay.
That's the only
That's fair.
And then I ad-libbed an argument under element 2 about a contradiction.
Okay, that's fine. So let's talk about the first the Kant card that explains why a priori reason has to be true. Why is it? Does Kant explain ever where a priori reason is a coherent concept, or does he just say morality can only be based on an a priori conception of the knowledge?
Throughout my negative case, I explain why a priori reason is a coherent concept. I'd say Velleman 1 speaks most directly to that. Kant explains why practical reason is the best meta-ethic. That would then imply that it is a coherent system.
Okay, sure. So let's go over Velleman 1. Where does Velleman 1 address the a priori, a posteriori divide?
He doesn't. I don't specifically speak to that. However, my Kant analysis would take out a posteriori because it exists within space and time.
Okay, so let's talk about the exists within space and time argument. Why can't an argument that exists in space and time account for human freedom?
Okay. Because my argument is that would always default to and trigger determinism, because everything within space and time is caused by something prior within space and time. So it's not. It doesn't really have any connection to our freedom.
Okay, sure. So then let's talk about the Joyce analysis as to why skepticism affirms. Joyce says that what?
Skeptigates.
Pardon me. Yeah. So Joyce says that it has to be within a system of obligation. Why is that true?
Okay, that's what moral permissibility is, right?
Why?
Moral permissibility only makes sense in regards to moral obligations. Morality sets up a system of obligations and prohibitions, and if something doesn't fit within that system, then it becomes morally permissible. If there's no system of morality, then there can't be a system of moral permissibility. It would be mere permissibility, not moral permissibility. So if there's no system of morality, there's no system of moral permissibility, just regular permissibility. And that's what I say Raz talks about, regular permissibility, which I'd say negates.
Okay, cool. So are there any arguments in the AC as to why permissibility triggers, or why permissibility or skepticism negates as opposed to triggers presumption?
I'd say it wouldn't trigger presumption. It would negate because you wouldn't be proving the resolution true. I'd say that skep would function as offense for the neg, so presumption would be a trigger. There are no skep triggers, though. We can just debate the framework debate if you want. We don't have to do skep.
Okay, sure.
I'd rather not, to be honest.
Okay, so let's talk about your responses then on the contention level, where you explained that there's a the Castle Doctrine has to be deliberate. Why does the Castle Doctrine have to be confrontational?
That's exactly what your evidence is talking about. The Castle Doctrine talks about you being trapped within your own home. My argument is that the victim is obviously not trapped in a non-confrontational situation. My argument would be like, Castle Doctrine may apply in confrontational situations. I'd say it doesn't because of my Leonard evidence, but I'd say even if it would apply in confrontational situations, that's not what the resolution is talking about.
Okay, cool. So, let's then talk about the NC. The contradictions, there's the development thing that's just like the extension and limitation. What was the ad-libbed argument?
The ad-libbed argument was essentially just a clarification of why it's a contradiction. We're extending and limiting freedom.
Oh, okay, so that's just...
It's not really like two different arguments. The arguments just sort of function together.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
So, if I can win under a universalizability framework, that that the resolution can be willed universally, is that sufficient to affirm?
Yep, if you prove that you can universalize the maxim of using deadly force, then that's sufficient to affirm.
Okay, cool. Ready? It's gonna go AC, NC. Ready? On Skeptic Gate 1, there's no warrant in choice making claim because you need to win order, you would have some sort of system of obligation in order to have a system of permissibility. There's no reason why that's true, but then second, you can set the AC interpretation, you can set the number 4, or the number 1 coming out of the top, so you accept a fatal life interpretation. That means that so far as I'm winning the RAS analysis is a more permissibility means that the fact that you're said no sufficient reason against something, that means that morality is not, or skepticism is not going to give it. Then third, he's conceding the analysis right above the RAS analysis that says accepted affirms that even absent moral prohibitions morally does exist, it's just not normative. That means that we can't allow normative obligations to act, and that can even concede analysis in the AC. That's going to be sufficient to take out his evidence so far. We're not rendering morality incoherent, we're just saying it's subjective and not normative. That's sufficient to affirm, but fourth, even if he's right about the nature of morality, that just means skepticism triggers presumption because we can't make more evaluations in the first place. That doesn't render statements permissible, way permissible, that renders moral statements false. That just triggers presumption because you can't evaluate moral ideas at all. Then go to the contention. You can extend his defense. It says that my arguments about motivational internals are sufficient to generate contracts. That means that the contracts are not going to be solving back to skeptical framework. Basically, the number 1 says it's just an appeal to another obligation. That's of course about evidence. Contracts don't solve. Then you can extend the Harmon. Then extend Harmon. There's no objective moral truth and no objective statement. Moral truth given into normative reasons why individuals ought to follow moral claims. He's conceding the motivational internalism argument in the AC, actually showing how the practical reason accounts for motivational internalism, how any sort of conception of motivational internalism. That's going to take out the NC office. All practical reason because he's conceded skepticism arguments as far as how many reasons why skepticism affirms. That's sufficient to vote F. But then go down to the Ripstein analysis. You can accept Ripstein. Ripstein says even present in absolute good nature that C will have to follow contract because other agents have invested their trust in the agreement. That's going to link back to the practical reason framework insofar as not following contracts is going to be problematic because it is disrespecting more worth of other agents who invest their trust in the agreement. Then also, on the arguments why it's most consistent with practical reason, he says that we don't need to agree to something, but that's not my argument. My argument is that isn't necessarily because we impose because laws reflect internally imposed laws. We can't universalizely say we don't have to respect laws because those represent agreements with other people. That means that contradicting those agreements is running contrary to our will because we will in agreement, then we also will a violation of that agreement. That results in a contradiction. That means first, Harmon is going to mean Harmon is going to take out the NC. That means skepticism is going to affirm. But then second, even if you don't buy that, if he's winning the practical reason framework, that's going to be sufficient in order for you to vote for the AC framework. So let's go to the AC contention level. On Leonard. One, read the internals of the evidence. Leonard's major conclusion on studies in the late 80s and early 90s before the advent of the Castle Doctrine confirm my evidence is more reason and thus reflects modern legal precedent which protects victims from conviction. Second, Leonard answers his own conclusion. High conviction rates are the result of lawyers concealing abuse. Leonard writes, historically, lawyers defending women to conceal abuse, frankly, abuse against their clients in court, self-defense allows the person to use force so the person believes he's in imminent danger when wins action fit the legal requirements of self-defense. She is more likely to be successful in court. 3. High conviction rates are a result of legal error, not the content of the law. Leonard 2. Lawyers and judges may not apply the laws properly in case of battered women. Homicide offenders analysis reveals that approximately 40% of the women cases were returned rate 5 times higher than other criminal conviction judgments. Many judges refuse to apply the law fairly, and attorneys are waiving or failing to pursue reversible or appeal errors on the part of trial judges. This can answer back to Leonard analysis and so on as an alternative causality for the reason why Leonard is true. Then he says that Castle Doctrine is not key to the moment. You can extend the OR analysis test in case of person it allows a person to use deadly force. If somebody's invading in their home, then you can extend the SUG analysis test inclusion. What happens if a home means if there's a co-inhabitant in your dwelling, you are justified using deadly force in a situation in which you feel like there is some sort of reasonable peril. Then you can extend the SUG 2 analysis test. The presumption lies on the fact that mean any act of deadly force is going to be considered an act of self-defense under the Castle Doctrine. That does away with the MC requirement. He's not doing a nearly good enough job responding to the internals of the evidence in the AC that's going to take out any sort of MC requirement. What is sort of requirement under deliberate? Then also, his definition of deliberate justifies consciously and intentionally. That doesn't necessarily imply premeditation. That just means you have to consciously take an action. We can consciously take an action out of self-defense. NC. First, all moral states are reducible to physical states, meaning that everything's going to have an NC cause-effect rating. Conceptions of freedom incoherent under his framework. Hapnow writes, The conservation of energy implies that force must be governed by deterministic laws. Mental forces run spontaneously, do nothing for sure that never let energy increase detailed physiological research gave no indication of physical effects that cannot be explained in terms of basic physical forces also occur outside of living bodies. Any mental and biological cause must themselves be physical. If they produce physical effects, objects by naturals, namely they state as physical effects, must itself be physical. Thus, since the only laws governing behavior, those containing behaviors of physical entity, mental events can only be caused by behaviors of physical. This means everything stands some sort of empirical entity, but also since a priori reason is impossible because that requires an abstract and the empirical nature of the individual, we can't exist. There's nothing that exists outside of us. We use Pappenheim says that everything is physical, meaning there can be nothing that exists outside the physical. Everything's empirical, therefore it's a cause and effect. That triggers SCEP.
Can I see Pappenheim before we do?
Yeah.
And as well as also the Castle Doctrine stuff out of the AC.
Which Castle Doctrine stuff?
Just the contention level.
Oh, okay, so not the Leonard stuff. Okay.
No. Okay. NCAC. Everybody? I bet none of you want to vote on skepticism. Good, you shouldn't and you don't have to. Here's why. Start on the NC. Extend the Kant analysis. Kant says that morality has to be based on freedom because morality is about evaluating whether or not someone's actions are right and wrong. Also extend within the Kant analysis that the only system of morality that can be based on freedom is practical a priori reason because it escapes space and time. Anything within space and time, as his Pappenheim analysis also states, results in determinism because every cause is caused by some prior cause. This means that everything except a priori reason results in determinism. If I answer back his Pappenheim argument, then this is going to mean that practical reason is the best meta-ethic for evaluating the round. Now off Pappenheim. One, we don't need physical in order for logical reasoning to occur. Even if we come about that reasoning through the physical, we say A and not A cannot both be true regardless of what's going on in the physical world. Those things exist independently. Just because we discover them doesn't mean that physicality is necessary for them. And second, physical realities don't matter without reason. We use reason to interpret our physical realities, so reason is going to preclude physical arguments in the first place. And third, that doesn't mean that everything is deterministic. This just means that everything physical is deterministic, and I'm already proving why a priori practical reason is not physical. And fourth, there's no reason, there's no reason why the content, there's no reason why process being physical means it's predetermined. My argument is that the content is not physical, so it's not predetermined insofar as there's no physical content of what is morally right. Morality based on practical reason still escapes Pappenheim's argument about determinism. Now, extend Velleman 1. Velleman 1 tells you that when we look to practical reason as the meta-ethic, we have to look to whether or not reasons are going to be contradictory to determine what is morally right. This is going to take out his argument about how contracts link into practical reason. Remember, he concedes off the AC in the last speech that Velleman 1 takes out contracts linking into practical reason because Velleman 1 specifically says that the only thing accessible to every agent is whether or not something forms a logical contradiction. Remember, the forms a logical contradiction. Jump to the AC really quickly where he tries to link practical reason and our contracts into practical reason. Extend my argument against this, which means that contracts can't link into practical reason because contracts aren't inherently binding. Insofar as he concedes that contracts aren't motivational, then they can't link into practical reason because practical reason is inherently motivational. There would be bad people that wouldn't sign contracts but still use practical reason, so contracts don't link into practical reason. This link is severed. Don't allow him to get his contracts offense back into practical reason. Jump back to the NC, let's extend offense. Extend that the negative urges to prove that the maximum using deadly force to kill an abuser is not universalizable. This goes completely conceded. Except the Velleman 2 analysis, which is my warrant for this, which says that it's not universalizable because when you kill another person, you are repressing their freedom by extending your own freedom. This is the argument made right in development. That's a contradiction. At the same time, when you try to universalize that maximum, their freedom is going to be repressed and extended at the exact same time. That's A and not A at the same time. That's a logical contradiction. The round is over on the NC. You can sign your ballot now because I'm the only one giving you a coherent moral theory. So here's how the round breaks down so far. I'm giving you a coherent moral theory that escapes determinism and escapes subjectivity, which is deontology. He's conceding the offense back to deontology. Go to the AC framework now. Before we get to skepticism, I'll ensure that I'm winning the framework debate. Look specifically to his argument where he's extending out of Harmon to try to trigger skepticism. This is his argument about how practical reason, there's no objective reasoning, practical reason doesn't account for everyone. However, extend my number one argument that I make against this, which says that every time an agent makes a judgment, particularly every time an agent makes a moral judgment, they use practical reason for this judgment. This is when I grouped his warrants to the framework as to why it's not going to be objective. Every time an agent makes a moral judgment, they use practical reason to make that judgment. That means that practical reason is binding to every agent, so can apply as an objective standard. He concedes this coming out of the NC. Practical reason functions as an objective standard because every time an agent acts, they necessarily act based on practical reasons. This is going to take out his Harmon analysis. We don't have to look to subjectivity. I'm grounding it objectively. Velleman 1 is also taking this out because he's conceding that every reasoner can access reasons in the exact same way. So, we're not triggering skepticism. Yay. You don't have to vote there. But, even if you think the only way to escape skepticism and practical reason is through contracts, let me extend the deliberate term, which he's not responding to. That's fine. He's right on the Leonard analysis. I did not know the study concluded this way. But let's go to the deliberate turn. This is what's really going to matter. extend that deliberate is defined as fully thought out or intentional. Extend the implication of this. The intention behind deadly force is not self-defense. The action is taken completely consciously consistent with the agent retaliating rather than defending or protecting herself. His response to this is that Castle doctrine is going to take this out because of the suit 2 evidence. However, the suit 2 evidence just says that if there's an intruder in your house and you fear for your life, then you can kill them. That's fine. That doesn't apply to domestic violence when deliberate deadly force is used, because deliberate deadly force implies that there is no fear for life, but rather the agent is premeditating and thinking about her actions. So the agent is not in fear when they're taking this action. So Castle doctrine and traditional self-defense arguments don't apply. He says that imminence doesn't matter. However, his evidence suggests that imminence matters. The agent at least has to be in fear. My argument coming out of deliberate is the agent is obviously not in fear in the case of the resolution. So here's what the round breaks down so far. Practical reason is very obviously the only framework for action. He's dropping way too many arcs on the AC that prove why practical reason is the best framework, as well as the Kant analysis. Oh, also, contracts don't link into practical reason because of the Kant analysis. Contracts are based within space and time. I've already proven to you why things based on space and time can't link into practical reasons. That's another reason contracts don't link into practical reason. But if you do evaluate the contracts debate, I'm winning on the deliberate turn. Now let's go to skepticism. If for some awful reason you end up having to vote there, I'm going to win why skepticism negates. Riggs in the Joyce definition, Riggs in the Joyce analysis, which says that something has to be within a system of morality to operate as morally permissible. His first argument is that I don't have a warrant for this. However, my warrant for this is that something would be merely permissible, not morally permissible if it wasn't in a system of morality. Morally permissible implies a system of morality. His number two is about the RAS definition. However, I concede the RAS definition, but RAS is not talking about moral permissibility. You can call the RAS card. It talks about permissibility in general. It just says something is permissible when there is no reason against it. It doesn't say morally permissible. So prefer by Joyce evidence, because I'm the only one contextualizing what it means for something to be morally permissible as opposed to merely permissible. His third argument is that Skep affirms because it's just a subjective norm. However, if contracts aren't binding and practical reason aren't binding, then there are no norms at all. Determinism is triggered, then skepticism is triggered, and we're not proving anything morally permissible, so it's still going to negate. He's not proving anything subjective. He's proving that there is no moral permissibility. He's proving that there is no coherent moral system. If it triggers skepticism, his fourth argument that this triggers presumption. However, one, it doesn't trigger presumption. It triggers regular permissibility. That's exactly what I'm talking about coming out with RAS analysis. And second, he doesn't extend presumption arguments. You can't vote half there anyway. You have to vote negative. So the round breaks down very, very clearly. Practical reason escapes skep. Contracts don't link to practical reason for 3 reasons. I'm the only one linking offense back to practical reason. But if you look to contracts, I'm winning on the deliberate turn. But if you do trigger skepticism negates. He should have answered the Joyce analysis or found a better card for his AC.
So, NC, AC. Ready? You can extend the Papanow analysis to all physical forces must be governed by determinants and lobbies. The conservation energy implies nothing to be absent physical forces. That means that any action has some sort of cause and effect in time. He's misunderstanding the way that my argument functions. He thinks it's a determinism trigger. My argument is not a determinism trigger. It says that it is an extrapolation of Kant evidence extending outward. It is Kant evidence that all morality must be independent space and time. As far as Papanow says that nothing exists independently space and time because all things must be determined by some sort of physical force, meaning they have to exist somewhere within space and time because they are a physical event. That's going to mean that a priori reason is an epistemically incoherent theory. We cannot account for anything. That's going to be sitting to take out all the practical reason arguments on the NC. All of his arguments were premised on like Papanow talking about determinism. I'm not talking about determinism. I can concede free will can exist under a Papanow framework, which says that that's caused by framing. That's caused by space and time. It is not a atemporal impact. It just occurs. It just occurs based off of deterministic laws governing behavior that have physical forces. That's not contradicting. That contradicts all of his framework. The Kant analysis specifically says that can't trigger morality. That can't create practical reason. But even if that's not true, AC. You can reinstate the harm analysis says no, there is no more objectivity, more truth, no objectivity, more truth can get normative by individual laws of all claims. His analysis here doesn't actually respond to the warrant and harm is a motivational internalism is a meta thing through which to evaluate morality. That means unless we can have a motivational reason for all me to follow or universalize my maps, that's not going to be to generate more prohibition on the action or more norm on the action as far as he's not giving you a link into practical reason, why practical reason to motivate us to universalize our action, motivate us to make these universal judgments. That means practical reason is not fulfilling the meta ethic that laid out within Harmon. So that's going to be sufficient to trigger skepticism. Then go to the skep affirms and skep negates debate. Go extend to number 3. This says I'm preempting his arguments in the analysis right above. Rather, it says skepticism doesn't render morality incoherent. It says it just renders moral statements like you can't generate normative statements that's rendered unable to condemn action. That's going to answer back all of his actions as far as I'm saying that moral skepticism doesn't render moral statements false or the ability to not construct moral statements in the first place. That's going to check back the requirement within the Joyce evidence. It's going to say that I can still generate moral systems. They're just not normative. They're not normatively binding individuals until I have subjective interpretations of what morality is. That's the analysis in the AC that he's conceiving. That's going to be enough to make skep affirm. Because his evidence doesn't actually respond to that argument at all. I'm saying we have a moral system that exists. It just can't be normative. It can't establish a normative prohibition on action anyway. That means skepticism affirms. But if you don't want to vote on skepticism, go down to Ripstein. You can send the Ripstein analysis in the analysis right below Ripstein to explain why contracts are the source of practical, or the result of practical reason. His argument says that contracts exist in space and time, so they can't be the source of practical reason. That's not a response to my argument. My argument says that it is a contradiction in logic to will, that you do not have to follow by contracts, so the contracts aren't morally binding, because that means that you are agreeing to a contract and simultaneously opting out of that contract. That means that's a contradiction in reason, which means the practical reason requires us to follow contracts. Contention. His only arguments I'm trying to send the deliberate argument you can send. My response to the deliberate argument is that anything that is intentional can be deliberate. That means that any action that are potentially going to take is for the deliberate requirement of deadly force, meaning even self-defense, to choose to act in self-defense, that's considered deliberate under some functional interpretation. But then second, you can set aside two evidence that explains why there is a presumption of fear, not necessarily that they actually are fear. That means the court doesn't even investigate what their actual motives are. That should presume that there is fear, and that justifies self-defense. That's going to be sufficient to warrant an outbound. So you can send your evidence as a Castle doctrine justifies the deadly force, use of deadly force against self-defense. If somebody invades on a home, then you send self-defense, that implies code habits at home. That's going to be sufficient to win back to the AC standard. Here's how the round breaks down. I'm winning. Skep affirms. If you want that in it, his NC collapses into skepticism. That's what's happening now in the harm analysis. Skep, you can vote after right there. But even if he's winning practical reason, I'm winning analysis. Says practical reason equals contract analysis off the AC contention.